narrative. Then chapters 183 and 184 were released, and we finally got the name of the kingdom. This was none other than Esperia, the land of instrument makers. This was a kingdom located in the West Blue, built around music, where the buildings had musical notes and clefs carved directly into the stonework, and a massive harp rose from the center of the island as its defining landmark. Brook was raised in this place as he was rescued from a junkyard by Prince Reuven. He was given a home in the palace, trained as a soldier, and he had risen to lead Esperia's elite military unit. And according to Brook, Esperia no longer exists. If you go back to chapter 443, this was when the Straw Hats first encountered Thriller Bark. This confirmed as an island from the West Blue that was converted into a pirate ship and dragged into the Florian Triangle, the world's largest ship and the first island in One Piece history to ever be turned into a sea-going vessel. The individual who confirms Thriller Bark's West Blue origin is none other than Brook. So here's the theory: there are two islands from the same sea. One was destroyed and one was stolen. Both are tied directly to the same character. What if the island that Gecko Moria converted into a floating graveyard was in fact Esperia, and Brook has spent more than 50 years as a skeleton drifting through the fog near the wreckage of his own country, and none of us had even realized it? But you know who would never be stolen by Gecko Moria? These are the individuals who are subscribed to the channel. Only 10% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy this content and want to see more, then hit the bell icon and the subscribe button for even more videos just like this. So with this theory, we need to talk about what the manga has confirmed so far. Thriller Bark was originally an island from the West Blue. Like I mentioned, chapter 443 confirms this, as well as Moria's Weaver card. This island was converted into a ship and it sailed to the Florian Triangle, where it lurked for roughly 10 years before the Straw Hats had arrived. Esperia was a kingdom in the West Blue. This is revealed within chapter 1183 to be Brook's homeland. Esperia has a musical culture with its instrument craftsmen, a opera house, a harbour called Silopod, as Oda confirms in SBS volume 56 that Brook would be Austrian if One Piece was set in the real world, and Austria is the country of Mozart and Beethoven. Esperia is the Italian form of Hesperia, a Greek term that translates to Western lands. The Greeks used it to describe territories west of their homeland. Oda named Brook's kingdom the Western Land, and he placed it in the West Blue. Brook says outright that Esperia no longer exists. He didn't say that it was attacked or was destroyed. He uses the same kind of total passive language which is used for places that the world government wipes from the historical record. Similar to God Valley, the island that was scrubbed so thoroughly that even the name was deleted from every record. So when something no longer exists within One Piece, somebody made sure of this. So we actually have a destroyed island and a stolen island, both from the same sea. Both are tied to the same character. It seems like the West Blue keeps showing up at the worst moments in the story. God Valley, the island where the Davy clan was hiding, where Garling discovered his targets, where the native hunting competition massacred civilians. This was also in the West Blue. Imu ordered every record of the island to be destroyed. Brook was born in Esperia 90 years ago. His childhood was pretty brutal. Both of his parents and his brother died from starvation because the king at the time was a tyrant who didn't care about his poorest subjects. Brook ended up living in the junkyard on the coastline with stray dogs, watching other children walk to music school while he played a violin that he'd built from garbage. At age 11, 79 years before the current story, he met Prince Reuven, and Reuven had been disguising himself as a commoner in order to learn more about his subjects, and he stumbled across this scrawny kid in the dump playing with trash instruments. Brook didn't know Reuven was royalty. He had assumed that the guy just liked music. The two quickly became friends as Brook made him a stew out of grasshoppers and a frog, flavored with curry powder that he'd stolen off of marine ships in the harbor. It was apparently terrible. Reuven ate it anyway because Brook had made it for him, and all he could think about while chewing was comparing this meal to his own royal meals, and how this kid here was eating insects to survive. This friendship had saved Brook's life. Corrupt Marines kidnapped him on suspicion of being a drug courier for the Molon family. They beat him in a warehouse and were about to kill him. Reuven stormed him with Kandel and the entire battle convoy. They beat the Marines without hesitation, and when his soldiers warned him that these men were backed by the world government, Reuven said that he didn't care, that the world government supporting corrupt soldiers was a sign that the world was coming to an end. He brought Brook into the palace, gave him a bed, and enrolled him into school, handing him real instruments and declaring that he would become Esperia's newest star. He's easily become one of the best side characters that Oda has introduced recently, and we've only seen him for 2 chapters. By age 20, Brook was leading the raider squad under King Reuven and Queen Kandel. By age 27, which was 63 years ago, the same year that Loki was born and Charlotte Linlin was abandoned on Elbaf, this is where everything collapses. Shuri allegedly kills Reuven. As Brook learns of the God Knights, Kandel departs the island as the kingdom falls. By age 38, Brook has joined the Rumbar Pirates, a crew that also formed in the West Blue, as he meets Laboon at Reverse Mountain and enters the Grand Line. The crew who gave this broken man a second family and a second purpose were from the same sea as the kingdom that he had lost. Shortly after entering the Grand Line, the Rumbar Pirates were attacked by enemy pirates that used poisoned weapons in the Florian Triangle. Their doctor was among the first casualties, so nobody could treat the poison. Brook suggested that they record one final song on a tone dial that they'd brought from a merchant. This was a final performance for Laboon. They played Bink's Sake as the poison took them one by one. The crew went from a full band to a quartet, a trio, and then a duet, and finally a solo as Brook played alone until he collapsed. He died while remembering Laboon. The Yomi Yomi no Mi brought his soul back, but the fog was so thick that it took him a full year to find his own body. By the time that he reached it, only bones remained. His afro survived because, as he put it, it had strong roots. He gathered his crewmates' skeletons and stored them in coffins below deck and drifted for 50 years. Now Moria, who was born in the West Blue, as we see chapter 1158's cover story reveal that he is Kozuki-Moria, raised in Wano's Ringo region. 24 years ago, he attended Roger's execution. 23 years ago, his Gecko pirates clashed with Kaido's beast pirates and his entire crew was killed. Moria stole Ryuma's corpse and Shusui and he fled back to his home sea, the West Blue. This was located directly south of Wano across the Calm Belt. There he found an island and began converting it into the ship we know as Thriller Bark. So it lurked within the Florian Triangle for 10 years before the Straw Hats arrived, meaning it arrived in the Triangle roughly 12 years before the present day. Esperia was destroyed sometime between 63 and 52 years ago. Moria returned to the West Blue roughly 23 years ago, so there's a gap of 30 to 40 years, where a destroyed kingdom was abandoned and left to rot, and an abandoned island kingdom that spent that long decaying would look exactly like the dead, overgrown, gothic, nightmarish island that the Straw Hats had encountered when they reached Thriller Bark. Now, comparing the architecture of Esperia and Thriller Bark, it's clear that they are not identical. Now, the question isn't whether if Thriller Bark looks like Esperia in its prime, it's whether if the underlying structure of the island matches once you account for 30 years of neglect and a madman bolting zombie infrastructure onto the remains of Esperia. Esperia's defining features include a palace at the center of the island surrounded by decorative gardens with barracks for guards. There's also mountainous terrain where the center rises above the lower sections, a smaller island connected by a bridge, Baroque architecture with musical motifs on every surface, a massive harp built into the island's center, a harbor and a moat. Thriller Bark has a mansion at the center surrounded by a dead forest, which is what you get when decorative gardens go unattended for decades, an inner stone wall encircling the central area with towers and a moat, elevated terrain plane at the center with the mast rising above the outer sections. A bridge called Perona's Wonder Garden connecting the main mansion to the mast mansion. Hogback's mansion resembling the Notre Dame Cathedral in its Gothic styling, a graveyard beyond the forest. The structural parallels run through the very foundations. Central Palace becomes the Central Mansion. Elevated terrain with lower surrounding sections in both, as Esperia's moat and harbour become Thriller-Bark's moat and outer wall. The bridge connecting a smaller island becomes the bridge connecting the mast mansion. Baroque architecture left to rot for decades and then overlaid with horror aesthetics starts to look gothic, as they share the same architectural DNA. If you go deeper, Esperia had a theatre street, a road lined with musical businesses leading to the opera house. Thriller-Bark has paths winding through a dead forest and between headstones hiding zombies underneath. Esperia had Siloport, a harbour for importing and exporting instruments, with warehouses nearby. Thriller-Bark has its own docking system, the outer wall's mouth gate which opens to swallow ships, and the island's perimeter which functions as an enclosed harbour. The infrastructure for receiving vessels was already there. Moria repurposed it. Esperia had a school where children learned instruments. This building is somewhere inside of Thriller-Bark's structure. Maybe it's Hogback's lab now, or maybe it collapsed decades ago, but the foundations must be buried in the soil of Thriller-Bark. 4 separate chains connect Thriller-Bark's outer wall to the mast above the mansion, structural reinforcements that Moria would have added to keep his converted island functional as a ship, but the landmass that he was reinforcing already had the bones of a city that was built into it. Moria added the outer wall with its mouth-shaped gate, installed the mast, let Hogback fill the mansion with surgical equipment. Perona decorated her bridge with her wild zombie animals, and her room inside of Mast Mansion was styled like a princess's chamber. Imagine if this space had originally belonged to Shuri, Esperia's actual princess. Moria then covers the island in fog and fills it with 900 walking zombies. So then there's a few questions that are left unanswered, like where did the massive harp go, the centerpiece of Esperia's skyline? Did Moria tear it down for materials, or is some fragment of it still buried within Thriller-Bark? Brook drifted alone in the Florian Triangle for 50 years, a skeleton without a crew or functional ship. He was surrounded by fog that was so thick that he couldn't see past the railing. The loneliness was so total that when he told Big Mom he had already experienced real terror, he had meant it. He'd endured something that would have destroyed anyone else's sanity. If Thriller-Bark is Esperia, then those 50 years would have become something far worse. Brook wasn't drifting through a random ocean, he was floating in the same stretch of sea where the island that raised him was being used as a zombie factory. The timelines overlap, and Brooks' own ship eventually drifted to Thriller-Bark itself. 5 years before the Straw Hats arrived, his vessel physically came to rest at the island. If this theory holds true, then Brook was living on the remains of his homeland for half a decade before Luffy showed up. At the end of the Thriller-Bark arc, after Moria was defeated, Usopp designed a tombstone. Frankie built it as Chopper decorated it with flowers. The Rumbar pirates' remains were buried in Thriller-Bark's graveyard. Brook said that he was glad that his crewmates could rest there. And then he says something that, if this theory is right, is one of the most devastating lines that Oda's written. He hoped that his crewmates could rest easier, since the earth in Thriller-Bark came from their native home of the West Blue. Brook connected Thriller-Bark's soil to his own sea. He noted out loud that his dead crewmates were being buried in earth from the blue where they'd all come from. The Rumbar pirates were a crew formed in the West Blue. Esperia was a kingdom in the West Blue. If the earth is Esperian soil, then the bones of his crew are resting in the ground of Brooks' homeland. This brings us to Gecko Moria. His entire existence revolves around taking dead things and making them useful. The Kage Kage no Mi lets him rip shadows from the living and stuff them into bodies in order to create soldiers. After Kaido killed his crew, Moria decided the lesson wasn't get stronger, it was let the dead fight so you can never risk losing anyone again. He stole Ryuma's body from Wano, a legendary swordsman who was dead for centuries, as he pulls him from his grave and turns him into a puppet carrying his own stolen blade. This body then ends up on Thriller Bark reanimated with Brooks' shadow, which meant that the zombie Ryuma immediately asked to see Nami's panties because he had the personality of a Guna gentleman skeleton shoved inside of a Wano samurai. Moria takes the remains of things that were once revered and he reduces them down to their raw material. So when he returns to the West Blue after watching everyone he cared about die, when he sails to his home sea looking for somewhere to start over, imagine if he finds the hollow remains of a kingdom that somebody already destroyed. The infrastructure was all there with palace walls, towers, a harbour. It was empty and abandoned. Thriller Bark was originally an island from the West Blue that was somehow converted into a pirate ship, so it wasn't constructed from scratch. He found remains and modified them, adding the outer walls, installing a mast, and he let Hogback set up a lab and filled the grounds with zombies. And Esperia's dead citizens, guards, potentially even Reuven, would have been material for Hogback's experiments. We know that Moria modified and combined bodies without caring about whose they were. If he found hundreds of remains in a destroyed kingdom, then he surely would have used every single one. Some fans have started to even theorize that one of Thriller Bark's larger zombie creatures has features echoing Reuven's build. Chapter 1158 reveals Moria's real name to be Kozuki-Moria. The kanji for Kozuki reversed becomes Gecko. The Kozuki clan carved the poneglyphs to preserve the history of the Void Century. Their mission was always about keeping the past alive and protecting what the powerful wanted to destroy. Moria, whether if he knew it or not, took an island that the world government wanted wiped from existence, and he preserved its physical structure by turning it into a ship that sailed across the oceans for years. So a member of the Kozuki clan accidentally prevented a dead kingdom from vanishing completely. While yes, he desecrated the identity of the place while inadvertently protecting its physical existence, which is a strange kind of preservation, but it's more than anyone else did for Esperia. Nobody came to save the kingdom for the decades that it was left to rot. After the Straw Hats defeated Moria, he reclaimed Thriller Bark and sailed it to Hachinozu, Blackbeard's territory. Moria was imprisoned by the Blackbeard pirates, so if Thriller Bark is Esperia and the remains of a potentially Davy-blooded kingdom ended up in the hands of Marshal D. Teach, a man whose father was Roxty Zebek, born from the Davy clan. So you can see how things are tying together pretty neatly. Oda revealed some clues within chapters 1183 and 1184 that point towards the reasons as to why Esperia was targeted. In the latest chapters, when we see Brook as a child, he's 11 years old, skinny with a big afro, round eyes and thick lips. Fans immediately noticed the resemblance to baby Blackbeard. He had the same hair, facial features, and the same triple eyelashes. King Reuven also has a similar build with messy hair and a pronounced jaw. These features echo what we've seen of Roxty Zebek and the Teach bloodline. While this isn't conclusive on its own, Oda reuses facial archetypes, but combined with the rest of our findings, this is hard to ignore. We still don't know about Brooks' family name. After 90 years of this character existing and almost 1,200 chapters, Oda hasn't revealed it. And I do feel like this is deliberate, as he's done it before by weaponizing names like Vinsmoke Sanji. This had completely changed the backstory of Sanji once this was revealed. Luffy is the grandson of Garp and the son of Dragon. Zoro carries Shimotsuki blood. Brook's family name is one of Oda's final unplayed cards. Brooks' post-Dressrosa bounty is 83 million berries. In Japanese wordplay, 83 can be read as Yami, darkness, the same word as Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi. Japanese channels have flagged this as Oda embeds wordplay into bounty numbers constantly, and this is standard practice for him. Brooks' Yomi Yomi no Mi manipulates the soul. His combat revolves around channeling soul energy via music. Music shakes the soul. This is his fighting philosophy. Also, look at the Rocks Pirates Jolly Roger. It features a skull with soul flame motifs, like the Hinotama, the traditional Japanese fireball imagery, which represents as departed human souls. Brook's old astral form, when he separates from his body, uses the exact same visual language. The fire around his spectral body is identical to the iconography on the flag of the crew that was captained by a descendant of the Davy clan. During the Davy backfight on Long Ring Longland, Luffy wore an afro with a skull and crossbones design styled with soul flames. It seems deliberate that Oda was evoking visual imagery of Brook during an arc named after the Davy clan's signature challenge. This was over 100 chapters before Brook appeared in One Piece. When you start listing all of the connecting threads, it is very striking. Esperia, God Valley, Thriller Bark's origin, Brook's birthplace, Moria's birthplace, Rocks and the Davy clan, the Rumbar Pirates formation, all of them trace back to the same sea, West Blue. Brook is at the center of all of this, and with Oda not having yet revealed his family name, fans are speculating that his full name is Davy D. Brook. If Reuven carried Davy blood, and it's true that he resembles the Teach Rocks phenotype, then Esperia's destruction would follow the exact same playbook as God Valley. At God Valley, the main operative was Figaland Garling. He embedded himself on the island, fathered Shanks and Shamrock with a local woman, and returned to participate in the massacre. He stabbed the twins' mother when she was no longer useful. This pattern is quite consistent. Outsider enters, integrates into the family, produces a child as the kingdom is destroyed from within. Look at Candel. She serves as captain of the battle convoy, a military leader with extraordinary combat skills. She is married to King Reuven and has a daughter called Shuri. Whether if Queen Candel was an outsider who entered Esperia's power structure or was a native born on the island, she occupies a similar structural position in Esperia's story that Garling occupied within God Valley. The manga hasn't confirmed if she is an infiltrator, but the parallel is very hard to ignore. What happened to the children after God Valley? Well, Dragon saved Shanks while Garling took Shamrock. Shanks became a pirate, Shamrock became a god knight. After Esperia, Brook became a pirate, and Shuri was adopted into the Manmaya family and became a god knight. The survivor who escaped went to sea as the child connected to the operative was absorbed into the world government's elite military order. 60 years ago, Emu didn't have the Mother Flame. The method would have been infiltration and dismantling, not annihilation from the sky. Esperia's remains would have survived sitting in the West Blue, abandoned until Moria came looking for material. The remaining Brook flashback chapters are going to show us how Esperia was destroyed. This is what Oda has been holding back, the 11 years between Brook at 27 and his departure as a pirate at 38. These upcoming chapters will contain the fall of Esperia, the truth about what Shuri did, and Candel's role in all of it. Also, how the island was physically destroyed will determine whether if this theory is true or false. If Esperia is vaporized and there's no ruins or a trace of it left, then nothing will survive for Moria to find. Also, if Oda confirms that Brook is connected to the Davy bloodline, then his role in the final saga will shift massively. His soul-based powers can directly interfere with Emu's possession. We had seen this during the Elbaf battle. When Gunko encountered Brook, her buried memories broke through Emu's control. She fought off the possession, deactivated her own powers, and freed the remaining Straw Hats. Everyone except Robin, who was bound by thorns rather than Gunko's ability. She told Brook to run before Emu took over again. Emu seized control and attacked Brook directly, demanding to know how he knew Gunko. Emu was afraid of this connection. Music and memory crack Emu's possession, it seems. And I think that the reason behind this goes a lot deeper than just shared memory between two individuals. Brook's Yomi Yomi no Mi is a soul-based fruit. His attacks channel the code of the underworld through his blade. His astral projection lets him separate his soul from his skeleton entirely. And during the Whole Cake Island arc, he proved that his soul manipulation can directly counter another soul-based power, as he withstood Big Mom's attempt to take his lifespan because, as he put it, he'd already died once. The Yomi Yomi no Mi gave him a relationship with death and the soul that other devil fruit users don't have. Contrastingly, Emu's possession works by overriding someone's identity, their will and personality along with their memories. It is an attack on the soul. If anyone on the Straw Hat crew is built to counter Emu's corruption, it's the skeleton who has already crossed the boundary between life and death and come back from it. Brook is the only Straw Hat with a personal connection to one of the current members of the Holy Knights. He despises Shuri for killing Reuven, the man who pulled him out of a dump and gave him everything. But if the truth mirrors what happened happened in Elbaf, then what Shuri did might be far more complicated than Brook witnessed. Consider what happened to Harold. Elbaf's king made a deal with the 5 elders that involved killing rocks. When he later refused Imu's order to conscript all giants into the navy fleet, his covenant was upgraded to depths level as his body started moving against his will. His personality was rewritten as he massacred his own gods and stabbed his friend Jarl in the head with a sword that he had once given him as a gift. In his final moments of mental clarity, Harold begged Loki to eat the legendary devil fruit and end his suffering before he killed everyone else on Elbaf. Loki mercifully killed his father at his own request, and then he carried the secret with him for 6 years while the entire nation despised him. If Reuven had suffered a similar fate, if the world government offered him a covenant and it took hold when he inevitably defied their orders, then Shuri may have been forced to do what Loki was forced to do. End her father's suffering before the corruption turned him into a weapon against his own people. Brook witnessed the act, but he didn't hear any of the conversation before, it seems. He didn't know that covenants exist, and he wasn't aware of the Holy Knights until decades later. If Reuven, like Harold, begged his daughter to kill him, then the hatred of Brook has been built on incomplete information that he's carried around for 6 decades. Oda is known to have revealed to us that he wanted a musician on Luffy's crew from very early on. Even Luffy insisted on finding a musician before a cook, doctor, or a shipwright, as he says this in chapter 8. Now we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. Do you think Thriller Bark is Esperia? What do you expect from the remaining flashback chapters? Are there any connections that I've forgotten to mention? Let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next One Piece video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.